2010 when people were making up whatever it is they needed to say. At the time that was an Obamacare argument, but it really took hold among the right-wing media. And Trump understood that instinctually, as he does. He utilized what I think was a lot of unhappiness and tension bubbling underneath the surface of a lot of the United States in 2015 and 2016. And in the intervening 3.5 years since he's been president, has turned that from information that was designed to promote a political position in now to one where you are simply trying to lock a block of people into a position that means that whatever Donald Trump says or does, there's an excuse around it. There's a reason he did it. And ultimately it was for the good of the people who are most being communicated with. And so, as I said, to bring it back to what we saw just a few weeks ago, is the Republican National Committee was one of those or convention, I should say, was one of those examples where it didn't matter what the truth was. It didn't matter what facts are. Trump and his family and his staff and everybody who organized that needed to drive a specific message to a group of people who probably already believed them, but probably needed some bucking up from a political perspective and enthusiasm perspective. But obviously it doesn't stay within the confines of Fox News or Donald Trump. It bleeds out into America. And so we've seen, that throughout his time, with rallies specifically, Trump has never been afraid to invoke violence. He's never been afraid to, talk about people on Fifth Avenue that I know Rick is going to talk a little bit about. And now what we're seeing, there were some violent scuffles at his events back in 2015 and 2016. Now what we're starting to see is, armed, typically men, showing up at state capitals, driving large pickup trucks into, city centers. And most tragically, a young man leaving his house in Illinois, crossing a state border and shooting 3 people. After having attended a Trump rally, after having, I think, probably been really fired up that, what he saw going on in Kenosha needed some additional help. He was going to go up there and help keep control. That's what the police are for. That's what local law enforcement is for. That, we're not a vigilante country. That's not what we do. But I think the real issue with radicalism is that you're taking folks who are already willing to believe whatever it is you say, regardless of its veracity or its truth, and they're willing to now start taking action. And I think we should talk a little bit more about this as we go. But I think the issue is, where does it end with a Trump? Where does it end in the next 50 some days in which he is now going to, be further and further behind, I think, as more revelations about how he feels about the military, the fact that he knew so much about COVID and so early, and his just general failures as a president in the last 3.5 years, surely, but in the last 7 or 8 months specifically. What is he going to say? And what are the people that he's saying it to? What are they going to be willing to do to protect him, to increase his electoral chances, or somehow mess with the electoral process, God forbid. And so, I think that's really, why we've taken this so seriously, is because we want to take what Trump says to what people do, and then what the real live effect on Americans can be, which is the last thing in the world any of us want are thousands or tens of thousands of these types of folks who believe anything he says, will do anything he asks, to really start taking proactive, tangible action in the real world as we get closer to Election Day.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. Tara, I'd love for you to comment on Trump's lies as an incitement of violence. And maybe you can talk about the differences in how he talks about protests and violence, depending on who the actors are.
Yeah, so the way that Trump uses language and is very interesting. A good friend of mine, she's a rhetorical professor. Her name is Jen Murcia, and she wrote a book about this, that Donald Trump is a rhetorical genius. He's the demagogue president. And she talks about several rhetorical devices that he uses to communicate. And, sometimes we think that what he does isn't strategic, and a lot of times it's not. It's impulsive. But there are some things that he does with purpose. And the words that he chooses and how he chooses to use them is purposeful. And one of the tactics that rhetorical tactics that she talks about is something called ad baculum, which is the use of force or intimidation as a rhetorical tool to get the result that you want, and to another way of not being held accountable. That's something that demagogues do. That's something that authoritarians do. They do all these different things so they can't be held accountable. And when he starts using language like the law and order stuff, these people are coming to your suburbs, the destruction, calling Biden the destroyer. Reed talked about the RNC, some of the language in the RNC. I've been to 6 Republican conventions since 1996. And what I saw a couple of weeks ago was horrifying. Listening to some of the things, I don't know what America they're talking about. And whatever they're talking about is actually happening right now in Trump's America, not Biden's. So the cognitive dissonance of all of that is very strange. But the constant use, back to Reed's point too, since 2015 and 2016, when Trump would say, I wish we could, like the old days, take that guy out, or I'll pay your legal bills. What toughness is, this very primitive idea of what being a man is, is toughness and all that tough talk. And that gins people up, people who are looking for a reason or an excuse to assert themselves and be heard in ways they may not have been before. Donald Trump is giving them license to do that with his language, and he's doing it on purpose. When he talked about dominating the streets during the peaceful protests, and of course you had some of the knuckleheads out there that were, violent and burning and looting things, and that's never okay. And there's still some that are doing that, and they need to stop. If any of my progressive friends are watching, tell your people to stop this because it's helping Donald Trump. But those are just small examples of that he's blowing out of proportion to say, see, this is, we need to, only I can fix it. It's very authoritarian. It's straight out of the authoritarian playbook, because when he continues to repeat these things over and over again, people start to believe it. Perception is reality in politics. It doesn't matter if it's only 2 square blocks in Portland. Portland's not on fire. It's not burning. It's like 2 blocks of these idiots that are engaging in this violent behavior. But it doesn't matter. Trump keeps repeating it. And people start to believe it. And then you have like Fox News and right-wing media that amplifies that same language. You listen to some of the words that come out of people's mouths on Fox News at night or on right-wing talk radio. They echo the same type of violent, inflammatory terms that get people riled up. So people are scared. There's a reason why Nixon, who was advised by Roger Ailes and by Roger Stone, there's a reason why, and Lee Atwater, who was one of the most notorious Republican consultants, he was an RNC chair back in the day, there's a reason why they used the law and order strategy and the Southern strategy, which was to appeal to the racism of the South, to help Nixon win, because it was in direct response to the civil rights riots in the 60s. And it scared suburban Americans, suburban white people, into thinking, oh my gosh, this is chaos. We don't want this. We need law and order. And Nixon was going to come and do it. We hear the exact same language coming out of Donald Trump, and it is incredibly dangerous. He goes after, Black football players for kneeling, however you feel about that. They're sons of bitches. But militiamen who pick up arms and end up going and shooting and killing people, or the Proud Boys or the Boogaloo movement or the 3%ers, these right-wing militias that our own Homeland Security Department has determined that white supremacy, domestic violence from white supremacists, is the #1 threat to the homeland, by the way. These people, Donald Trump doesn't condemn that. Those are his people. Charlottesville, good people on both sides, right? Very fine people on both sides. His duplicitousness on this is dangerous. And Carl Bernstein, who's of Woodward and Bernstein fame, Carl Bernstein said on CNN a couple of weeks ago that we are in a cold civil war. And he's absolutely right. And my fear is that Donald Trump and his rhetoric is going to turn that cold civil war hot, which is why we have to call it out and not accept it, because that is not the America that we want to live in. So we have to pay attention to the words, why he's doing that, and making sure he's held accountable, because that is not normal. It's not okay. We're not a vigilante country. Law and order only seems to apply to Donald Trump's rhetoric, but not to his own administration or his own campaign.
Yeah. Thanks, Tara. Rick, I want to go to you to address the news that just came out yesterday with the Woodward tapes. I mean, Trump may not have shot someone on Fifth Avenue, as he used to joke about, but his radicalizing rhetoric has enabled him to otherwise get away with the death of nearly 200,000 people.
Well, Ron, that's a terrific observation. And the important thing to understand about Donald Trump at this moment is that for all the lies about fake news and all the complaints about biased media, Donald Trump's confession that his indifference and his mendacity and his outright lying to the American people about the risks and dangers and emergence of COVID has cost the lives of 200,000 Americans. We're about to enter the fall where every epidemiological expert is predicting a big resurgence. And there are many models that conservatively think that we could have 400,000 people dead by the time the year ends. It's terrifying. And it's all from the origin point of January 28th, where he says in Woodward's book, it is admitted that on January 28th, Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, went to him and said, Mr. President, this is coming. It will be the worst thing you're going to ever face. This is going to be the definitional crisis of your administration. And Trump then, a few days later, is briefed again, and he starts talking to Bob Woodward and saying, well, I know it's airborne. I know it's not the flu. It's worse than the flu. It's 5 times more deadly. Young people get it. And there's this long string of interviews, 18 and some total, with Bob Woodward that Donald Trump uses as this moment to try to spin Woodward on his version of history, but he's on tape. This isn't fake news. This is contemporaneous confession by the president. And on the other side of the two columns, we have Donald Trump going out on the podium during his briefing palooza era and saying, it's going away. It's not that bad. Young people are fine. No one gets it. It's not a big deal. It's going to disappear like magic. We've only got a couple cases. We've got this unbelievable confession to Bob Woodward on the one hand, and this lie to America on the other. It is one of the most egregious acts of presidential malfeasance I've ever seen. Other than Jefferson Davis and Robert E. Lee, no one has ever killed more Americans in this country than Donald Trump. No one. He is now, we're gonna by the end of the year be past the number of people who died in World War I, who died during the war against Hitler, who died in Korea, in Vietnam, in 9/11. We're going to reach a point where we've got a 9/11 every 2.5 days in this country. And so, we understand who Donald Trump is. He has confessed it. He's told us he saw the worst crisis possible coming at this country, and he decided to do nothing. The spin from the White House is completely facile and stupid. It doesn't work. Nobody's buying it. This idea, I'm trying to be the calming leader. We've got a digital ad coming out in a little while that has the same sort of thing. I'm trying to be the calming, steady leader. The same man who's screaming that black and brown people are coming to your suburbs to kill you, that Mexicans are rapists, that Puerto Ricans are lazy and they're not rebuilding their country. This is a president who has always tried to stoke tension and panic and fear with people. Look, the guy says Antifa like a mantra every day to try to scare the hell out of Americans. So this argument he was trying to be the steady and calm leader is complete BS. And his own taped voice is the condemnation that he is richly deserving.
Yeah. Okay, I want to go to Q&A now and get through as many of these as we can. We've got so many good questions already written in. The first one, and we're gonna try and make these as diverse as possible because we have a lot of questions along the same lines. So if I ask you a question, it's probably representative of a lot of other people who've asked the same thing. So let's go to Gary Albrecht first. What can we as citizens do to push back at or combat Trump's inevitable declaration of victory on election night? Reed, do you want to take that first?
Sure. I mean, I think first and foremost is, encouraging, wherever it is you live, getting out and voting, whether or not that's by mail, whether or not that's early voting, whether or not that's voting in person. If you're comfortable to do that, get out and vote, get your friends, your family, your colleagues, anyone and everyone you can. Consider serving as a poll worker if you feel comfortable doing that. And then I think more importantly is, and Rick is our resident Florida man here, is that we will probably know the results of Florida on election night. And if Florida is a blowout for Joe Biden, then the rest is probably all over. And so I think that the best thing we can do is ensure that Joe Biden wins by a lot. But I think it's also ensuring that, in our own ways, and we'll be more vocal on this here in the coming days and in the next couple of weeks, is ensuring that every one of your elected officials, from your city councilman to your state legislator to your state senator, your governor, your senator, your member of Congress, understands that you will not stand for any messing around as far as this election is concerned. They must be held to account. They must be on notice that none of us are going to put up with this.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's go to Robert Fernandez. What is a good response to his supporters claiming they have a right to protest, challenge the peaceful protesters? Tara?
Well, so the question is the Trump folks that have a right to counter protest the protesters.
Mhm.
So the people who are going there and now being agitators. Here's the difference. There's a difference between being a protester and being an agitator. What I've seen from some of the Trump folks who are going to these places, they're going there and starting trouble with folks who are otherwise peaceful protesters. And then if you're going into the situation where there's riots and looting, why are you going to that? That's, to Reed's point, that's what law enforcement is for. It is not your job to take up arms in a militia at this point and do the job of law enforcement in this country. That is very dangerous. And Trump is just not discouraging people from doing that. So if you want to protest and you're pro-Trump and you want to go to your local park and get your permit and go and protest and wave Donald Trump flag, make America great again flags all day, that's great. But when it becomes an aggressive type of presence, like the Proud Boys and the others that I've named, then it's a cauldron. You're looking for a fight. And we've seen this, hopping in pickup trucks with your spraying mace at people and spraying paintball guns and driving through city centers, intimidating. That is what they're doing. That's not a peaceful protest. That's agitating. And that is what leads to people getting hurt. And we've already seen what happened in Kenosha, and we've seen what's happened in other places with some of these people. And we don't want that. This is that's not a protest. That's agitating. They're doing exactly what they claim they despise.
Right. Rick, I want to go to you for this next one. It's from Michael Fisher. He says, what is being done to stop Russia from polarizing our country and influencing the election outcome? And maybe you can comment on the Rubio report and what we learned there.
Well, sadly, what we learned in the Rubio report was that they knew very well that Donald Trump's connections to Russia were more tangible than Bill Barr spun them. And what's being done right now to push back on Russia's efforts to influence this election is bupkis, nothing, zip, zero, nada. In fact, Chad Wolf of the DHS this week now faces a whistleblower complaint from an intelligence analyst who said that brought Chad Wolf, the DHS head, a report saying Russia is doing it again. Here are the details. He was told, take it away. You're not issuing this report because, and this is, well, according to the article, because Chad Wolf said to him, it makes the president look bad. So if the president looks bad because he's taking help from Russia, maybe they're confusing object and subject. It looks bad because it is bad. It is bad because he is bad at not rejecting the fact that the Russians are trying to help him win again. An American president, and Trump is a fundamentally un-American president, we're not ashamed to say that anymore. An American president would be front and center and telling Vladimir Putin, get the out of our elections right now. There will be consequences if you continue this. But instead, Donald Trump, like he does with any other authoritarian or any other scumbag who likes him, he says, well, he likes me. It's okay. So this is something we are as a group and the allies that in the pro-Biden side of this equation are all having to face right now. Folks, I beg of you, when you see the crazy article on Facebook about Joe Biden, some ridiculous claim about Joe Biden, please, for the love of God, remember, there's a high likelihood it's coming from the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, Russia, and being pumped out not only by the GRU, but by Donald Trump and his allies. There's not much difference between them anymore.
Yeah.
And Ron, may I just say a couple of things? One is the Rubio report that you mentioned came out of the Senate Intelligence Committee a couple of weeks ago, and a couple of things on that. One, it reinforces that Republican senators have known for 18 months just how long, just how tied up these guys were together. And they acquitted him during impeachment anyway. They knew, and they didn't do anything about it. Secondly, it's an interesting political dynamic. Richard Burr, who was previously the chairman of that committee, had to step down because now it turns out that they all did know how bad COVID was going to be, and he got in trouble with insider trading, rightfully so. So they made Marco Rubio, the most invertebrate member of the United States Senate, maybe after Lindsey Graham, chairman. And I don't think Rubio wanted to put this report out, but I think it's interesting that a report like that doesn't get out of a Republican Senate without Mitch McConnell somehow being okay with it. So that's an interesting thing we should remember. And then lastly, if you happen to live in the state of Wisconsin or care about the United States Constitution, ring up Senator Ron Johnson's office in Madison or wherever he's from in DC, because in the very near days, 7 to 10 days from now, probably, you're going to see him, with all of his Russia-provided propaganda about Hunter Biden. Rudy Giuliani is going to show up with his 600-page dossier claiming that, Joe Biden has, secretly wears a red star at night. So it's all of a type. All of this mixed up together is something designed to ultimately confuse, throw sand in the eyes and sand in the gears, and ultimately get people not to show up. Trump can't win a low turnout election. A high turnout election. He can only win a low turnout election, and that's what all of this is designed to do.
Can I just say one last thing on that? One last thing, just to put an exclamation point on it. Not only did we have all of that, and you don't have to take our words for it, you can just see what our own government has said. The US Treasury Department came out today and sanctioned a Ukrainian member of parliament who was palling around with Rudy Giuliani, feeding him all kinds of disinformation. And our government determined that this guy is an active Russian intelligence agent. He has been for over a decade. This is who Rudy Giuliani, Devin Nunes, and Senator Ron Johnson in Wisconsin have been getting all this information from, claiming they have all these corruption charges and all these things about Joe Biden. It's coming from a Russian intelligence officer who is also a member of parliament in Ukraine. These are the lengths that these people are going to. And so when people question, why do we go after senators, Republican senators and things like that like we're the apostates? No, this is why we're doing that, because these people have been enablers, and they are unwitting or witting, useful idiots for the Russian intelligence services, who are specifically trying to sow discord, cultural, racial division, and question the integrity of our election. Our own government has written these reports and put them out. Steve Mnuchin talked about, the guy's name is Andrei Derkach. And then you also had the Office of National Intelligence come out. The head of the election security division over there came out over the summer and said that this is what the Russians were doing, that they're targeting Joe Biden's health, mental health, these nonsense claims about corruption in Ukraine, and trying to hack into Joe Biden's campaign consultants to try to do a repeat of 2016. All of these things are not happening in a vacuum. So the fact you have a president of the United States that doesn't want to hear it and continues to praise Russia is just, that on its face alone is enough to make him unfit to be president of the United States.
And these Republican senators know better. They're not unwitting. They're very witty.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct.
They're collaborators at this point.
Yes.
They are collaborators. And if you're the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and if you've issued a report that says we knew all about this for 18 months, and you still walked away from the prosecution of Donald Trump in the Senate for his impeachment based on this exact kind of corruption, this exact world that has produced so much chaos for Donald Trump, of being linked to and tied into the Russians, it is inevitable that it's going to splash over on these guys. Ron Johnson is not up for re-election this year, but he will be. He will be at some point. And there will be a reckoning for a guy like that who colluded with the Russians, who used his position and his power to try to influence an American election by using Russian propaganda and Russian intelligence material in this country. Donald Trump did it with WikiLeaks and Assange through Roger Stone in 2016, and he's trying to do it with Ron Johnson in 2020.
Well, and just as a closing note, remember that Johnson really wants to be governor of Wisconsin. So let's make that much more difficult for him.
Yes.
That's fair.
Fair. Okay, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but this question is from Ross Vick, and it's very specific. So I want to return to this topic. But he says, address the perception that Trump supporters are in for him no matter what he says or does, because they believe that whatever is revealed about his character is fake news. Then discuss how many fence sitters there still may be in this election, and how do we convince them that anyone but Trump, sadly even Mike Pence, is better than Trump.
Ooh, there's a lot to unpack there.
I know. Who wants to take
Well,
that?
I think that, look, we have a situation, back to the topic of our visit here, Ron, is radicalization can take many forms, and not everyone that's a Trump fan is necessarily radicalized. But what it means is that they have decided that they are going to fully accept the Fox News, OANN, Steve Bannon, Mark Levin, Rush Limbaugh, sort of flywheel of doom as fact, even when the world is so clearly antithetical to everything that they push out there. So, how can you break that off? I don't know that it's necessarily possible at this point, but they have shown a willingness, to abide by whatever it is they're told. And you should understand that it's like a 24/7 process, like it never ends. Once you decide you're going to step through that looking glass, you very rarely step outside of it. And when folks challenge you on it, you tend to get, at least I've seen in my personal experience with my family, they don't react well.
Yeah. Okay.
It's true. It's the problem with this situation is that it is very cult-like. It's like a cult. And if you read books on how people are deprogrammed from cults, that's kind of what the tactics we have to use when we're dealing with Trump supporters, and watching how people, friendships, families, co-workers, how this has just ripped people apart because they are so conditioned and so emotionally invested, because a lot of their support for Trump is not rational. It's emotional
Correct.
Investment.
Absolutely
because
right.
they feel because they feel a certain kinship with him, because they validated a lot of their grievances and whatever that form that takes for some of these folks. And I had no idea how many of them there were in this country, a lot. But that is something that you are never going to be able to logically be able to convince someone of. So how many are still persuadable? It depends on who you talk to, but they say between 5 and 7%. In most normal elections, it's about 20%. This one seems to be a lot closer, but 5 or 7% in the swing states that we need makes a huge difference in the Electoral College. So those are the folks we need to, unfortunately, the hardcore rabid Trump supporters, the shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue crowd, you're never going to change them. And if they're in your family or your friends, you're going to have to just think about why you want to still be friends with them, maybe, and how you want to kind of smooth it over with your family. But you're not going to convince them to change their minds. It doesn't matter. We've got him on tape saying things. He talked about grabbing women by the P word, and that didn't move them. So I don't know. I just don't know what else would. We got to find that sweet spot for the 5 or 7% that are still persuadable, which I find hard to believe that they still need to be convinced. But that's our job.
So this is a good segue to another question that we have from David Hannigan. And I think I want to try and dig into this and actually be helpful to David, because we get a lot of questions just like this. So he says, could you discuss the kind of language that you use, not necessarily in your ads, but in everyday conversation with Republicans you respect, but who are still with Trump, to move the needle in their understanding of how dangerous he is to American unity? So, Ann Applebaum came on the podcast recently, and she talked about, one tip that she offered was to ask people if what they see on Fox News, if the hellscape that they have been programmed to believe is happening right now is actually happening where they are. If you look out your window, like you mentioned Portland, Tara, it's 2 blocks, but Portland is not burning, right? To sort of get them to believe their eyes instead of what is being portrayed in in what would happen in Joe Biden's America, right, under Trump, which is happening on Trump's watch. What else would you say to answer David's question, to what kind of language you use? And I'll repeat this: everyday conversation with Republicans you respect, but who are still with Trump, to move the needle in their understanding of how dangerous he is to American unity.
I'm not sure that those things live together.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Right. There aren't any
I-
Republicans who respect that they still support Trump, as far as I'm concerned.
Or they're at
Listen,
this point
I'm-
they're not talking to us anymore.
I'm fresh out of respect for those folks. They know who he is. They have made their peace with him. They have decided there is a moral line that they don't ever have to look at again. They have decided they can collaborate with him in whatever malfeasance he's engaged in, whatever corruption he's engaged in, and in whatever destruction of our institutions and our Constitution he's engaged in. They have said it over and over again. If we're owning the libs and we get the judges, that's all they care about. That has become the centerpiece of Trump republicanism. This idea that blowing up the political environment around us is sufficient for leadership in the country. And that is a good in and of itself. Those people, I'm sorry, I can't respect those people anymore, because they have gone well beyond any sort of rational attachment to Trump. They have made these elaborate constructs in their head that allow them to say, well, my decision to stick with him is based on either opportunism or fear or whatever. Well, guess what? If you're still with Trump right now, you're probably, as an elected official, you're irredeemable. And you have therefore, as we like to say, bought the ticket, and you're going to take the ride. And there will be a moment in this country, not just this year, but in the years to come, where unless you are in a red district, in a red state, people are going to look at you and say, you stuck with this guy? Because it's never going to get any less bad. It's never going to get any less stinky. It's not like after he leaves office, we're gonna suddenly discover he was out helping orphan children and wayward pets at night. We're gonna discover it was worse than we thought. It was more corrupt, and that these guys in the Senate, in the Intelligence Committee, and the Judiciary Committee in particular, knew what was happening.
That's
But
right.
Ron, if go ahead, Tara, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, to answer the part about how do you talk to people every day about what's happening who still support Trump. Well, we'll take out, I think we've established that there are no Republicans who support Trump that we still respect. But what I often do, and I just say, would you have been as supportive if Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton did X, Y, Z? And they usually can't answer that, because it's blatant hypocrisy. And they don't, it may make them uncomfortable. But if you were to say, could you imagine 10 years ago when Barack Obama was president, that he was cozying up to Vladimir Putin, let him interfere in elections, that he was writing love letters to Kim Jong-un, and, he called generals, the P word, and said they were suckers and losers in the military. Could you imagine if Barack Obama had did that? Because I remember when we as Republicans freaked out when Barack Obama wore a tan suit and saluted a Marine with a coffee in his hand, and went to play golf after a journalist was beheaded by ISIS, and he went and played golf. Like,
Listen, Tara, if that had happened,
how is this okay now?
If that had happened, there would be a 10 square block radius around the White House burned to the damn ground.
Correct.
Republicans would lose their freaking minds.
That's right. So there, you can pick any number of egregious things that Donald Trump has done in just one day, and ask them, what if Hillary Clinton had done that? What if Barack Obama had done that? And usually they can't answer it, and it forces them to have to face their own hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And I think, Ron, throughout history, when we see these sorts of movements too, typically they're accompanied by some sort of massive economic disruption or social or governmental disruption. And remember, when Trump got elected, the economy was relatively speaking on the rise, and we were, although we always have men and women in harm's way, we were not engaged in heavy duty, combat. And so this was something that had sort of been building. Of course, now, that tsunami has crashed, literally and figuratively, as we've had COVID, kill hundreds of thousands of Americans, sick millions more, put, 20, 30 million people out of work. And now what you see is that this is the kind of time that oftentimes authoritarians take advantage of because they say only I can fix it. And he's actually said that, right? He said
did.
those words. He says those words on a pretty regular basis. And so, this is one of those times where, we got to do it now, right? November 3rd is the day. If you live in North Carolina, you're already voting, get the ballot back. Next week it's Pennsylvania. The week after it's Florida. The week after that it's Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, wherever it is, do your part, right? If you're not going to do it now, you're never going to do it. And if it's not, if what you're seeing now can't get you there, I'm not sure what will.
Right. Get out and vote. This is, as Reed said, and we're going to keep making sure that folks know when these dates come, when you can register, when you can vote, when you can request a ballot, when your ballot needs to be turned in by, when you can early vote. We're going to keep folks informed on that on a whole variety of platforms through Lincoln Project. But it is important. We can only do so much. You've got to get out there and make that commitment that you're going to do the thing that is that final flip of the switch. You've got to get out there and either get that ballot in the mail or get yourself into a voting booth, because nothing else matters. All the tweeting in the world won't make a difference if you don't go and vote. And there are probably 20,000 people watching this stream right now. And I really want to encourage all of you, if you don't go to vote.org, if you have any doubts about your state's deadlines, vote.org for your state will tell you right away when and how you can register, when and how you can request early, when and how you can request absentee, when and how you can vote early. This election is going to be over in mid to late October. They're going to be, the majority of the votes will be turned in by then. We cannot allow the Trump campaign to get ahead of us on those things. It is absolutely vital that we get folks out and get them out now.
Yes.
They're talking about possibly 60% of the electorate this time around will have voted early by mail, which is unprecedented. And not only, right, if not more, that's just now what they're seeing, could be more. And not only do you have a responsibility to make sure you vote, but if you can convince, cajole whoever you need to, 2 or 3 other people to make sure they vote also, because the more the merrier. So if you can spread the word, encourage others to vote too, do your part in that way, in that respect as well.
Yep. Okay, Reed, I want to pass it to you for closing remarks here. We're just about at time, and we got a couple minutes left to go. But before I do, I want to just ask everybody who's watching right now or who's going to watch this on repeat, if you can contribute, go to lincolnproject.us/donate, or you find the donate up at the top right. That's what we need right now. For those of you who have already donated, we thank you. We wouldn't be here without you. There are hundreds of thousands of you who are making this movement possible, and millions more who are following us on social media and sharing our content. We need you to do that. We also need resources to finish this race. So if you have the means, contribute if you can, lincolnproject.us/donate. And if you can't, sign up on our website, lincolnproject.us, and you can learn more about how else you can help.
Ron, real quick.
Yeah.
Ron, real quick. I noticed that a lot of folks have asked how they can get Lincoln Project gear. A lot of people are like, where'd you get that hat? How do you do
Why
that?
don't you tell them, Tara?
So, I mean, I don't know the website. you know that.
lincolnproject.us/gear. lincolnproject.us/gear, and you can look as stylish as Tara does.
Yeah.
We've got lots of great stuff up there.
You cannot look that stylish. But you can
No, there's no universal.
I look as stylish as Tara. And my Jersey Shore sweatshirt and beach hair, but you can't buy the tan, but you can get the hat.
There we go. We've got a link in the chat if you're interested. Thank you for that, CJ. Pete, can you bring us home?
Sure. No, thank you, Ron, and thanks to Tara and Rick for joining me, and to everybody out there tonight. Thank you so much for participating in this. As I have said before, and we've all said before, we are absolutely flattered and humbled at the number of people who have joined us, whether or not that's your contribution, whether or not that's you've signed up to volunteer, whether or not, as Ron said, you take our content and you amplify it to your friends and family. We cannot and will not be able to do this without all of you. You are literally the individuals that make all of this stuff happen on a daily basis. So thank you so much. And look, as I told our staff and our volunteers and our interns today, there's no place I'd rather be than right here, right now, doing what we're all doing together. And please never forget that without you all, none of it happens. And so thank you so much. If you ever have any questions, Ron said you can sign up at the website. If you live in one of those swing states, please sign up to volunteer. We have an incredible political team who is figuring out exactly who those Lincoln voters are, who those Republicans and independents for Biden are, and getting them out, getting them to vote. So thank you so much. If there's anything we can ever do, there's numerous ways to reach us. But I cannot wait for this next 52 days, and I cannot wait for all of us, not only as an organization and as a movement, but as a country, to celebrate Biden's victory here on November 3rd. So thank you so much.
You're here. Good night,
Thanks,
Here,
everyone.
folks.
here.
Thanks.